and welcome to episode 22 of the ADHD podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about ADHD overwhelm, what it is and why it happens. And today, I've got joining with me for this conversation a previous guest, mindfulness coach Jeorgia Spencer. So welcome, Jeorgia.
Hello. Hi.
How you doing? You all right?
Oh, good, thank you. Excited for the conversation, definitely.
It's good to have you back.
Thanks for having me.
Now, I know being overwhelmed. Oh, start that again.
We're good.
Now, I know being overwhelmed is not exactly the nicest place for our heads to be. And I've been overwhelmed quite a few times in the past and fairly recently as well, to be fair. So what does overwhelm mean? What does it all mean?
I think if we think about the ADHD brain and how we process information, overwhelm for us might look quite different to a neurotypical person. So a neurotypical person may be able to be overwhelmed by something. So let's say overwhelm is an intense feeling of maybe not being able to make a decision, high level of stress. Potentially with that high level of stress, you might get some anxiety with that. With the anxiety, there might be certain bodily functions that are happening. So, increased heart rate, tummy ache, maybe headache, potential breathlessness, all of those things. Now, for a neurotypical person, stress absolutely happens. We know this. We know that we are in a society where stress is prevalent in every sector, in education, in children. It filters through every level of society. But what we know about ADHD brains is that we are much more susceptible, or actually neurodivergent brains, to be honest, are much more susceptible to overwhelm. And some of this can be down to decision fatigue. Okay, so what we can really struggle with our neurodivergent brains is lots of transitions and transitions between different tasks. Okay, so for a neurotypical brain, the average day, there are certain routines that we have. There are certain things that we do that are almost like automated responses in the brain. So potentially for a neurotypical brain, they wake up in the morning, the alarm goes off. The neurotypical brain is kind of aware of the next steps. So actually, right, I need to get out of bed. I need to get myself ready. I need to brush my teeth and have breakfast and do all of those things. And a lot of these responses become very automated from a young age. What we know about a lot of neurodivergent brains is that this habit formation is a much trickier beast, and it actually is something that as adults we can still really, really struggle with. So what often happens is we almost create these big to-do lists in our brains. From the second that we wake up, there is this narrative of all of the things that we need to do and these kind of micro transitions. So these steps from one thing to the next, from one thing to the next. And something as small as brushing our teeth might involve 10 or 11 steps. And it may be that one or two of those are automated in our brains. It may be that none of them are automated in our brains. So what tends to happen is we are managing so many more kind of micro tasks or micro to-dos almost throughout our day. So what tends to happen is by the time we get to lunchtime, even just lunchtime itself, in an average day, we have made hundreds, potentially even thousands of those micro decisions. So our brains start to go into this, this sense of stuckness, of decision, of not being able to do things that we know, I've done this before, like why is it that I can't do the thing? And overwhelm can come from the day-to-day. So it can come from decision fatigue, actually just struggling to make decisions that other people potentially, or on days that we're less overwhelmed, we can manage to make better, or in a more automated way. But it can also come from change. So for us, change is something that, particularly ADHD brains, we kind of crave like novelty. So we crave newness, we crave things being interesting and exciting. And that's also why routine is quite hard for us to follow, because if something becomes too routine, it's quite boring. And boring for us is like, well, I don't want to do that. I'm not going to get the dopamine, that feel good motivation hormone coming out of the boring thing. So I have to change it up. But when I change it up, that's also quite overwhelming. And it means that it's more for me to remember. And those automated responses take extra time with us. So for an ADHD brain, overwhelm can feature in so many different things. We can get social overwhelm. So it's not just the kind of day-to-day tasks, but it can also be in managing our relationships with others. And that's when we kind of think of things like the spoon theory is talked about a lot with neurodivergent brains. So, that idea that we have a certain amount of spoons that we start with on an average day. And something that for a neurotypical brain might only take 2 spoons or 1 spoon, for us in certain days could actually take us 10 spoons or 11 spoons, 15 spoons, whatever it might be. So sometimes we are working on an energy deficit. And when we work on that energy deficit, we can become even more overwhelmed by things that on another day where we've maybe managed that and nurtured that a bit better. So we've built up a reserve of spoons that we can pull from and use to kind of reinstate our spoons and make sure that we've got enough energy for the day. We can manage. But on days that we're depleted, it can be really, really overwhelming. So overwhelm, as as the word, and in a sense, can feature in every single aspect of our lives. So that can be our jobs, our relationships. If we happen to be a parent as well, that can be a really, really big thing. Anything that involves decision making is somewhere that overwhelm will creep into if we are neurodivergent and we are struggling with kind of managing all of the things that we have to juggle on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of the time, the reason that we struggle with that is because of the amount of micro decisions that our brain, lets us make or makes us make in a lot of ways, instead of things being automated.
So can it be from sensory as well?
Yeah.
So yes, I kind of like, I get that. I didn't realize I was getting that until I guess probably about a year ago. My son, he verbally stims, and some of the noises he makes was too much, and no idea why. Couldn't understand it. Really couldn't understand what was going on. And now I say about a year and a half ago, just before I got diagnosed, and it was just it was just like my brain couldn't function. It was just whatever I'm trying to concentrate on, it's not happening. Everything is too loud, too much, and it's not other sounds. It was just certain sounds that it was making. And it's very robotic, like electronic kind of noise, beeping and things like that.
Yeah, and buzzing.
Yeah, and none of this makes any sense. And when I got diagnosed, I started looking at it. I think it is that sort of just being over sensory, stimulated, and just very quickly going into sort of overwhelm. And then the other week, I had an issue at work. And I've never had an issue at work with being overstimulated in that way. But the alarms for the the security tags on clothing and things like that, they were going off. They had an issue, and they were just going off when people just walk past them, going off and off constantly. And it really triggered me. I couldn't believe what was going on in my head. I couldn't believe this was happening, because the alarms go off a fair bit anyway. But this was just so much. I had to ask my supervisor to take me off, because I can't do this. I can't do this. And it was a case of, you take me off, or I've got to go home, because I'm not doing this. I was like, okay. All right, I don't feel so bad about the feelings I was getting from my sons now, because I was thinking, maybe I'm just a grumpy dad or something, but no, yeah, it was seriously an issue. That was a strange one. This is a new, really sort of new sensation and a realization about what I sort of go through, and it took it right out of me.
It's kind of that window of tolerance, isn't it? So when we are overwhelmed, we are exactly, as you said, we're overstimulated. So our brains are overstimulated, which often will send us into this sense of actually indecision. I can't make any decisions. I just need to go and lay and sit in a quiet space and kind of be away from everything and everyone. But a lot of us deal with things like that in a different way. So we actually have 8 senses. So a lot of kind of what we taught at school is about the 5 senses. So, what you can see, what you can taste, what you can touch, what you can feel, what you can hear. But we also have our vestibular system. So that is our kind of balance. And that can be something that can, be affected by overwhelm. We have interoception. So that is our brain's way of understanding and picking up signals of what's going on inside our bodies. So things like thirst cues, hunger cues, when we need the toilet or don't need the toilet, bowel movements, all of those things. And then on top of that, we also have our proprioception. So that's where we are in relation to others and space. So with those 8 senses, what often happens, particularly when we're overwhelmed, we all have a different baseline of where those senses sit and how sensitive we are to certain senses. So it might be that we actually sensory seek certain senses. So, when we're overstimulated, it might be that we really quite like bright lights, for example. Now, for me, that's something that I find really overstimulating when I'm overwhelmed. Bright lights for me are an absolute no-go. So the side light is always something that I'm a big fan of. For some other people, bright lights might actually be something that they seek when they're overwhelmed because it's a soothing thing. So, all of those 8 senses are completely different and interlinked with one another. And what will happen is our brains will I like to describe it almost as a temperature gauge. So you've got like a heating thermostat, and every single one of our senses is kind of at a different degree. And it could be that our baseline is that, so for me, I'm quite sensitive to textures. So textures of food, textures of clothing. And if I notice that I'm overwhelmed, I become a lot more aware of those textures. So what tends to happen is that thermostat kind of turns right up for me. So I get more irritated by labels in my clothes. I tend to eat foods that have similar textures because I'm really aware of the textures of food. Even things like fizzy drinks, sometimes it can feel too sharp for me if I'm feeling quite overwhelmed. Some people, it might be the other way around. It might be that they like to hold something that gives them that sensory feedback when they're overwhelmed. They might have something that they can rub together that feels nice. There might be crunchy foods that really help them to re-regulate. So what can be really helpful is, as an adult, looking at each of those senses and thinking about, when I get overwhelmed, where does my temperature gauge tend to go? So does it tend to get ramped right up? Does it tend to kind of stay somewhere neutral? Or does it tend to be something that actually I'm less aware of? So, one of our things is our kind of temperature regulation. So when we're overwhelmed, we might not pick up on the fact that we're actually getting irritable because we're hot. And we haven't picked up on that because that's that interoception. It's our body, our brain kind of understanding what's going on in our body. So actually, am I hot? Am I thirsty? Am I hungry? Am I tired? Thinking back about some of those basic needs, looking at the room around me, is the lighting too bright? Actually, are my clothes irritating me right now? Is there something that I can feel that is annoying me? So it's kind of like doing a sensory audit. So when we're in that sense of overwhelm and we're in kind of indecision and we're maybe at that pinnacle point almost just before the volcano erupts, where we're like, I don't know what's going on right now, but I am so overstimulated, it can be really, really helpful to think about when we're not in that mode. So before we're in that mode, or maybe after that's happened, what were some of the things that were my triggers? And if we know that, then we can start to kind of audit that in our lives and think about, I'm not going to be able to control every single time the lighting is really bright. There are going to be times that I have to go to the supermarket at the end of the day when I've been working all day and I'm tired and the light's really bright and that's overstimulating for me. But what can I do to kind of dial that down a little bit? Or are there shops where there are a few more windows that I can go in instead? Do I need to do a full food shop at that point in the day, or can I just go in and get the absolute basics? So working out a kind of sensory audit and where our biggest triggers tend to be, and then also thinking about where you can give yourself grace. So actually, where, if you're feeling really, really overwhelmed, are you going to allow yourself to tap out? Because ultimately, as adults, we can make those decisions. And sometimes that's difficult because work commitments, if we happen to be a parent in relationships and things like that, those choices can impact others. But are we being too hard on ourselves? Are we expecting ourselves to behave in a very, very neurotypical way in a neurotypical world, when actually, if we just gave ourselves a little bit more patience, a little bit more empathy, a little bit more understanding that I'm not a bad person right now, I'm just really overstimulated and overwhelmed, and I maybe need a bit of time. So thinking about within those senses, where do you sensory seek? So actually for me, I find music really soothing. So there are certain soundtracks, and they won't necessarily be soundtracks with words in them. They will just be sort of background noise that I will listen to with my eyes shut in a kind of dark room when I'm feeling like I'm so overwhelmed that I just can't cope. That for me is really, really soothing. Some people might find that a bath is really soothing. Some people might find that something like a bath or a shower is horrendous, and it's the opposite of what they need in that moment. Or the thought of then getting out of the bath or the shower is so overwhelming, and all of the sensory feedback that involves, being cold, having the towel scratching you, all of those kinds of things. So a big, big, big part of my kind of discovery in my own, neurodivergence was working out what my triggers were in terms of my senses. And rather than being annoyed that I'd been triggered, which ultimately was going to make me more triggered and more overwhelmed, giving myself grace to go, that's interesting. Being curious about it. Oh, that's really interesting. And that's what's good about mindfulness. Mindfulness is about being in the moment and being curious. So rather than putting any judgment to it and thinking, oh, why do I always get like this when this happens? Or why don't I realize that I'm thirsty and that's why I'm irritated, until it's been hours and hours and I haven't had a drink? Oh, it's interesting that I got irritable again. And when I look back, it's because I didn't drink. What could I do to support myself next time? Maybe I need a variety of drinks. Maybe I need to set a visual reminder somewhere for myself to drink. How can I work with the systems that I have already that aren't working and turn them on their head?
Yeah, I guess it comes down to, well, pretty much like everything with neurodivergent sort of way of life is self-awareness. Knowing what's going on, knowing why you feel a certain way, why you struggle a certain way, are there things you can put in place to help with that? I mean, for me, with my so at home, I have my headphones now. They go wherever I am. They follow me, because I know the noises, I know the situations that's gonna start my head. Rick, yeah, here you go. And so I try to be, I guess, proactive and get there before it happens. So rather than let it get to the stage where, right, okay, my head is ringing now, I need to put my headphones on, I do it before we get to that stage. So I don't start going up and peaking into the real frustration and my head's going to just explode with what's going on. I just put them on, and it's usually, I was listening to music for a bit, but then I found that, especially if I wanted to read, just the sound of rain. So just the sound of rain coming down, nice and easy, nice and calm and soothing, and then I can carry on with what I'm doing, and that helps to keep me calm. And it's better than silence, to be fair, because silence is always my go-to in most cases. But when it comes to the sensory side of things, the rain is very soothing for me.
It's really interesting because a lot of people say that. A lot of people say that about nature noises, things like the fire kind of going off. if you think biologically way, way, way back to when we were cavemen and women, if you were in a situation where it was raining, you were often kind of gathered with your tribe. You were kind of, so they say that a lot of ADHD people kind of come from the hunters and gatherers of the world. So we were the ones that would go out and we would, look for food and we would be out at night and things like that. So if you think about rain, that would have been the time that we would have been kind of hiding away with our tribes, with people that accepted us for who we were, sitting in quiet solitude, maybe being quite present in the moment. It might have been that we were looking out for actually where that rainwater was going so that we knew that we could get refreshments in that particular area. So it's really interesting. Things like fire. A lot of people like fire sounds. If you think about fire and what that represents, again, in that form, it would have been a time to sit and to ponder and to socialize or to cook. It's kind of a nurturing experience. And then if you think about bird noises, birds only sing when it's safe. Yeah. So actually, there's this biological connection with safety. So if you are soothed by bird noises, there is something in your body that knows that is that kind of natural safe noise. And that can be better than silence sometimes, because actually nature isn't silent. Yeah, we kind of create silence in our lives. We live in a very modern systemic way, and silence can be very silent if we want it to be. We can have completely noise cancelling headphones, etc. But if you're out in nature, there's always going to be some noise, whether that's the wind, whether that's the sea, whether that's the the movement of walking on the grass, whatever it might be. So actually those natural noises can be really helpful at re-regulating our nervous systems when we're stressed, and bringing us from that fight or flight where we feel like we need to defend ourselves or we need to kind of run away, to thinking, actually, I can rest here, I can be safe, everything's okay.
Yeah, I get that. I think for a long time I've always said that my head always wants to have silence. It's that's what it needs. It's striving to have silence all around, but no, actually it's calm that it needs, and calm can come in various different packages, I guess. I love being out in nature. I love hearing the birds and the water and the fire crackling and the rain. That is all soothing and calming. So yeah.
Massively. Me too. I'm a big advocate for getting outside and just being able to be in that moment, whatever that looks like. So for a lot of us, we ruminate. We have, particularly if we're very overwhelmed, we have a lot of racing thoughts. We have a lot of negative thoughts about ourselves, about our lives, that kind of going off on a tangent. And you might have 4 or 5 of these streams of conversation going on at the same time. It's very noisy inside our heads. The amazing thing about nature and being out in nature is it forces us to be in the moment, particularly when we're walking in nature, because actually we need to be aware of where our feet are. We need to be aware of if there's any kind of animals around us, what's safe and what's not safe. So there is that sense of being really present. So when I'm on a walk, I will always try and not have headphones on, and just to kind of listen out for whatever it might be, and just see how my body responds to that, whether it enjoys it or not. If I decide to maybe go and sit somewhere and I've been out in nature for a little while, then I might listen to some music or listen to a podcast or something like that. But I really try to make myself just be present in that moment, because actually if you sit and you listen to nature, it never sounds completely the same. So you could be there for 5 hours and there would be lots of different noises that were going on. And if you challenged your brain to, if I just close my eyes right now and I really listen out, what is the furthest thing that I can hear away from me? And then if I really listen, what's the closest thing? What's the texture of that? Does it sound crunchy? Does it sound squishy? Does it sound soft? All of those things are bringing you into the present moment and stopping your head from going into the to-do list, the shopping list. Why didn't I do this? I'm really annoyed at myself that happened the way it did earlier. Oh, I think I've upset so-and-so, whatever it might be. You can kind of really bring yourself into that. And the other thing that does that is breathing.
Yeah, breathing is good.
For life.
Yeah. Yeah, my favorite place in the world is the Lake District.
Mm.
And I've always said to my wife that whenever we're there, whenever I'm there, whatever's going on in my head, whatever I'm struggling with, whatever pressure there is at, from work or life, and I'm always okay in the Lake District. I'm always okay. Everything's easy. My head feels calmer. If there's an issue, I will just tackle it in a very blasé way, kind of thing. If even little things like, we'll go somewhere else and, we forgot a jacket, and it's horrible weather. That's, more money, and I've got to buy another jacket now, otherwise. I'm in the Lake District, and I'm like, we'll just buy another one. It's fine. It's just everything just washes off me. And I like that. I really do like that. Because everything just feels easy in my head.
I think it's really important for everybody to work out where their version of the Lake District, because everyone's got their place. They're like, oh, that just nurtures me. Every time I go there, I just love it. And for me, I love Cornwall. Cornwall is like, I grew up spending so much time in Cornwall. But locally, I'm very lucky to live near the sea, and that is something that really nurtures me. Just being near the sea, getting in the sea, really being present at the seaside is something that I know massively re-regulates me. And I will know the difference between a day that I've been out and I've done that and a day that I haven't. Even if I've done all the other things that are good for my brain, I can absolutely tell the difference between those 2 days.
Yeah. It makes a huge difference. So say you know what's going on. You've got some self-awareness, whether it's ADHD or not. If you know what the issue is and how to deal with it, I guess it can make a massive difference.
Mm.
But for those who don't know, and who go into overwhelm a lot, I mean, what sort of impact on their lives can that have?
Overwhelm can affect everything. So if you are overwhelmed, you are either not making decisions or you're making very impulsive decisions. And we know that with our ADHD brains, we quite like impulsivity, but it doesn't always give us the best outcome. I am someone who in my 20s was in and out of debt consistently because of my high levels of impulsivity and that kind of dopamine chasing. So it can lead us to dopamine chasing in other ways. So we can get quite addictive personalities. We can chase that dopamine high elsewhere. So because we're feeling so overwhelmed with everything else, we're almost kind of running away from those things rather than dealing with them because they feel like too much. And we might have a crutch in other ways. So that can be all sorts of different addictions, from what might be classed as, socially acceptable addictions to less so. So even something like a phone addiction, people tend to doom scroll for hours and hours when they are feeling really overstimulated because it's easier than having to kind of be present and deal with the things. And what often happens is life becomes very anxiety provoking. So things that when you're not overwhelmed wouldn't feel like a very big deal suddenly feel really, really massive, and our resilience levels are hugely impacted. So we are much less resilient. We are way more explosive and emotional. So we will either have kind of those big explosive emotions, and our rejection sensitivity, which is something that we can really, really struggle with anyway, is on like complete high alert. So it's almost like all of our senses are kind of ramped right up. And then on top of that, we are struggling to make decisions, or when we're making decisions, we're not making them in the way that maybe is the best for our life, for the people in our lives as well. We can get quite kind of one track minded, where we struggle to think about other people's perspectives because we're so stuck in how we're feeling and getting out of that. We can go the opposite. So rather than kind of seeking out things, we can completely withdraw. So that can look like social isolation, that can look like relationship isolation, that can look like isolation in the workplace, not putting ourselves out there, not maybe having that get up and go to think, yeah, I'm going to do that, I'm going to challenge myself to do that thing, not trying anything new, sitting in that safeness, because actually life feels really unsafe. So why am I, change feels unsafe to me, I can't tackle this stuff. I want to change it, but I don't have the energy to be able to change that. So how am I going to change this other thing over here? You know, that my job or where I'm living or my relationship, whatever it might be. So we can get stuck in not only indecision, but in living lives that we're not happy with and in places that we don't want to be for a long period of time because we can't make those decisions or it just feels too big and too much. And our sleep is another one, you know, absolutely massively impacts our sleep. We might sleep too much. We might not sleep enough. We might have a mixture of those things.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, sleep is hard enough as it is, to be fair. But yeah, I mean, the reason why I asked that sort of question about how it can impact when you don't know what's going on is that I struggled. Well, I didn't think I struggled. There was these excuses I had in my head for my career. I mean, we're obviously, you know, career hoppers, unless you work for yourself. But I was in the same industry, but I changed jobs on a, you know, I wasn't there for a year, 2 years maybe. And I always told myself it's for a, you know, it's for a pay rise, you know, it's for a promotion, it's for a bigger health club, you know, and it's and all of this, but it wasn't. At the end of the day, I left because everything just got too much.
Yeah.
And there were so many things that every task I was given I can do. But there were just so many tasks that I was given, and some of them I needed a little bit of help and guidance with. Some of them I thought were more important than others. So you put things on the back burner, and those things then get forgotten a little bit, and then things get put on top of that, and then all of a sudden I've got all these things to do with very similar, you know, amount of urgency behind it. I'm like, I can't do all this. I can't. It's all too much. It's all too much, and I can't work out what's going on. I can't work out which should I do first or second. And I used to go to work sometimes and just sit there and look at the computer and like,
I don't know where to start.
Yeah, I just don't. I'm going to go clean something because I just don't know what, you know, and because of that, and it wouldn't stop for me. That's when I looked at another job.
Yeah.
You know, and then because it was great, so you hand in your notice, big relief. You got another job, dopamine flowing, and I always had to move for it as well. You know, so it was like I moved to a different part of the country. It's all exciting. It's great, fantastic. You know, and then a year into it, the same thing. So look again. You know.
Yeah.
And now, because I know what's going on, now I know what to do or what not to do. What job do I want to have? You know, I don't want to go back into that industry and do what I did before because I don't want to stress. Even though I can put things into place now, I'm still going to stress, and I don't want to stress at work and then bring it home.
Sorry, I'm just going to move my cat because he's playing with a really loud ball and I'm aware that it's going to be in the background and the noises. I'm just going to pick because otherwise he's going to, and I don't want to miss that bit. So 2 seconds, sorry.
No worries.
Right, hang on. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm just... That'll be the way round. I could hear this like jingle bells and I was like, oh no. Right, sorry. I don't know at what point, and I was like, oh no, this is going to be in the background and it's going to run.
That's all right. But yeah, it's just putting all that in place now, and which is great, but I will still stress that, you know, working, doing that same thing, and I don't want to bring that home. You know, I've got things to do here where I need to be present and, you know, and of sound mind, and I can't do that working in an environment that I know I'm going to be constantly stressed.
I think what's really interesting with what you've said is the level of self-awareness. So we talked about self-awareness earlier, and actually what you have learned is that I was doing jobs and I was masking a lot. So I was kind of, I was saying, yep, I can do all of those things. And actually what you knew is that you could do maybe 80% of it really, really well. And they were the things that gave you the dopamine. They were the things that you enjoyed doing. You probably did them twice as fast as your colleagues because they were the things that gave you that kind of like immediate feedback. They were things that you could get on with that you really liked. And then those other things kind of building up in the background. And that's when we get that imposter syndrome, where we're like, oh, people are going to realize that I'm a fraud, that I can't do this job because I can't do this, maybe 10, 20% of my role. But what you've learned is actually there will be roles out there where the majority of my job are the things that I'm good at, that I can foster those skills in. And maybe the bits that I struggle with, I can be a bit more open about my struggle, or I can frame it in a different way, or I can think about actually, rather than seeing it as a weakness, seeing it as a difference in the way that I work. So it, for me, working in offices, it was always admin tasks that I was like, oh, so bored. Get me to do the doing. I will do the doing, whatever that looks like. So if you want me to deliver something, I'll go and do it. If you want me to create a presentation, I can do that. If you want me to talk to people, I'm happy to do that. But sitting down and report writing and data and all of those things that were equally important in a lot of those jobs, didn't want to do those. And then it would be until a deadline was looming, because often with ADHD we see time as kind of now or not now. So it's either right now and it's immediate and it needs to be done immediately, or it's like it's ages away, unless it's urgent. So we almost need that sense of urgency sometimes to get things done. And people can say lots of different things. They can go, oh, plan it in, put it in your diary. If we do not want to do it, we will find anything else to do but the thing that we need to do. Like you said, I'll clean the office. I used to make people cups of tea, like whatever it took to not have to do the thing. I'd volunteer myself for other things that weren't even in my job description when I worked in offices, to avoid report writing that, wasn't due for 2 weeks, because that's ages away. I don't need to do that till I need to do it. Some of that is always going to be the case. But when you learn a bit more about overwhelm, what you start to learn is actually what's my baseline and where do I need to kind of almost step in and intervene for myself. So when I was at university, any essay that I ever wrote, I've got 3 degrees, any essay that I ever wrote was the night before, 2 nights before the due date, and I would stay up all night and I wouldn't eat and I wouldn't sleep, and I'd be typing away, panic. I'd have extensions, because I'd get myself in such a state over the fact that I'd left it to the last minute, and the extension might be a week or a month, however long it would be. I still wouldn't do the work until right before the extension deadline. So actually it didn't make any difference for me having that. What I had to learn was that actually my brain, in that time that I was procrastinating, was actually processing a lot of information. So what I was doing without realizing is I was mentally planning those things. So I was visually kind of working out, okay, so for this essay, I think I've got this idea and I've got that idea, and I'm going to kind of merge them together. And a lot of that was going on in the background. So a lot of the things that you probably put off at work till the last minute, you would have in some way processed or planned just without having physically done the thing. And it would have been the doing of the thing that was left at the last minute. But what tends to happen is we do that with lots of different things. And then suddenly we're like, I've got all the doing to do and I've got no thinking left. I've got no brain power left. So sometimes it's about having that mental check-in, and that might be actually having someone in your life who loves you and who knows you well, kind of checking in and going, right, you've got that deadline. I reckon you've really been like thinking about it. I think you've probably been mulling over it. Why don't you maybe just sit for 5 minutes and make a start, just 5 minutes? And I think the way that our brains often work is we feel like we need to do everything 100% of the time. So if we feel like we can only give 10%, we won't try it, because we're like, no, I don't want to half-ass it. I want to do it all. But actually what often happens is once we start and the wheels are in motion, we will get it done really quickly, because our brain's actually already done a lot of that processing. It just hasn't put it in one place. It's kind of done it all in the background. So actually just sitting and doing something for 1 minute And I started this quite a lot back at university, especially in my last degree, where I learned a little bit how to manage my brain slightly. Actually, if I just set a 1 minute timer, I kind of saw it as a bit of a challenge. Like, you know, if I didn't write anything in 1 minute, I didn't write anything in 1 minute. 9 times out of 10, most of the time, the minute would go off, I'd snooze it, carry on. And then before I knew it, it had been 40 minutes and I'd written a page and a half or something. And most of that was workable, things that I could go back to. So sometimes it's not about going, you know, I can't do this or I can't do these types of tasks. There are going to be jobs that we have to do. There are going to be things in our lives that we have to do, responsibilities that we have to do that our brains don't like, that we do get overwhelmed by. How can we break them down? How can we chunk them out, make them more manageable for our brains rather than trying to see them in a neurotypical way? So the neurotypical way would be, oh, well, you know, put it in your planner, plan out the time, break it down, do 10 minutes a day. Our brains don't work like that. And that's okay.
No, absolutely. And it takes a while to understand that. It takes a while to understand what you are, in a sense, what you're capable of, but at the same time, what you can stand, what you can put up with, what needs to happen to make you tick, what needs to happen to make you get things done, you know.
Yeah.
As you say, you know, it's very typical for ADHDers to leave things to the last minute because that urgency
gives us dopamine.
Yeah, you know, and you might not know that. I mean, I never knew that back in the time, but it doesn't mean I didn't do that. I did. I will clean that. If anyone's coming around this house, you know, I will clean the house in that half an hour.
Yeah.
And it, all the time, you know, they're coming in 3 days time. I ain't doing anything. They're on the way. Okay, now I'm going to clean the whole house and it'll be fine by the time they get here. But now I know why I do it. You know, it makes a bit more sense. But yeah, that's what we do, is just understanding what we do and why we do it, and try to have those things in place as much as you can, just so you can function as well as possible.
And I think the big thing with that is knowing that that's going to be inevitable. So at some point I'm going to need to get my Speedy Gonzales on, and I'm going to need to do something quickly because I've procrastinated it and I've left it. Going back to that sensory audit. So I know that from doing that, my nervous system is going to be all over the place because I'm going to be in fight or flight. I'm going to be in this like, what can I do to re-regulate myself after? What can I do to pre-regulate myself? So actually, before I tackle the task, do I need to go for a nice long walk? That can work really well. So actually, physically moving can help our brains to kind of recognize getting a job done. So it's kind of, you know, it goes back to those hunter-gatherer days. We're going out, we're finding the food, we're doing the thing. So actually, if you go out for a walk, whether that's just a walk around the block, and then you get in, you keep your shoes on, and you go and start the task that you needed to do, it's amazing what you can get done if you don't sit down. As soon as we sit down, gone.
Yes. Yeah. And weirdly enough, I didn't realize that until maybe a few weeks ago. I mean, I kind of knew it, but I've read it somewhere. You know, one thing you don't want to do when you get home and you're doing stuff, don't sit down. I'm like, oh, yeah. Once I'm down, I could be in the middle of doing everything, that'd be great. And for whatever reason, I just get sidetracked slightly to, the postman's just delivered a letter, whatever, you know, and I open up, I'm sitting down.
That's it.
Yes, it's gone.
In the bin. Yeah.
Oh dear.
The other thing that's interesting within that is a lot of kind of neurotypical advice productivity would be eat the frog. Have you heard of eat the frog? Where it's like, get the hardest thing done first and then you get the motivation to do the rest in your day. Our brains don't really work like that, because immediately we're like, that thing's really hard and it's massive, I don't want to do it, so we're going to procrastinate. Whereas actually, if you maybe do something that's easy, that you enjoy, but you've got the wheels in motion, and then whilst you've done that thing, you can then start to tackle the thing that's a bit more difficult, and some people might go, oh yeah, but you're going to procrastinate that hard thing. Well, if you're clever with it, you kind of pair it with something that you like doing. So for me, if I'm, not that I do things like that very often anymore, but if I had to maybe write, a report or something that I really didn't want to do, I would put on a particular podcast, and I might clean a bit of my kitchen to start off with. So I'm not even doing the thing. I'm not looking at the report. I'm not doing the thing. I'm listening to a podcast that I like. I'm, putting the dishes away. I'm doing the thing. And then I might stand up still, have my laptop open, just happen to kind of open the document, carry on doing a thing. Then I might think, right, I'm going to do a couple of minutes, see where I get to. I won't even physically sit down. So sometimes I will work from my kitchen, and it isn't often, luckily, anymore that I have to do those kinds of things. Because again, like you said, you work out what type of work works for you, what you're good at. So for me, I'm much more of a people person. So actually being a coach is great because I get to do a lot more of the kind of the people-y stuff. But if there's something that I've got to maybe research that, is going to take some time and energy out of me, I will think of a way of tapping it alongside something else that maybe I don't mind so much, or that is quite physical, so that the wheels are still in motion for me. I won't try and tackle that big thing first thing in the morning because I haven't got enough spoons. I haven't kind of built up the spoons. Yeah. Another thing that can be really good for me that I love to do, I like to get in the sea, go swimming. So if I've done that first thing in the morning, I've got a massive rush of dopamine. I get home and I'm like, I feel like I can tackle the world. So yeah, if that's the case, I probably could write that report or, do that thing that I didn't want to do and get it done very quickly.
I find it quite interesting that as a neurotypical, I guess, as I was back then, none of this crosses your mind. You just crack on, you fail, and then you struggle on, you fail again, you just work yourself into such a bad place. But you don't think about things like this. It's not until I was actually got diagnosed, really, and we're on the journey to get my son diagnosed and all that as well, that you start realizing and start researching, start looking at things, and start seeing how much of a difference things can make.
It's often the really simple things as well. So we've probably spent most of our lives comparing ourselves to very neurotypical people, telling ourselves that we're broken. It's not the system that's broken, it's us. So I'm just lazy. How many times is it? If you just concentrate a bit harder, you'll be able to do it. Or if you, didn't meet a deadline at work, or you'd left it right to the last minute. I know that I very much used to do this. I would beat myself up about it so much. I get so angry at myself. Why can't you just do it? Everyone else can do it. Why is this such a problem? Like you're an idiot. Why is this such a big deal? And I would get so upset, and I would, get myself into a right state. I'd be crying. I used to have panic attacks over deadlines at work. But, on the surface level, my colleagues didn't know that about me. My staff, my team never knew that about me. I would completely put that mask on. Everything's fine, because I was so scared of being found out being a fraud, like someone who didn't deserve this job because I couldn't do. I remember I used to manage a team and I had to write the minutes of team meetings, and it wouldn't be until about 8 minutes before the next meeting that I would be writing the last minutes, and it would be like, my team would be saying, oh, did you not send out the minutes? I hadn't even written them from the last time. It might have been 5 weeks ago that it was there, and I'd have some rough notes on a piece of paper that I'd lost or something, and I'd be having to try and remember what we'd covered in the meeting, because it just wasn't a task that gave me any kind of dopamine. And it was like, oh, that's so dull and boring, I couldn't think of anything else. Now, if I was in that position, I would probably be thinking about, how can I delegate that? Do I even need to do that? Realistically, can I voice record myself, and my team? And can I use that as the footnotes to be able to, AI is another amazing thing that is out there. A lot of people are quite skeptical about AI, but I think from a neurodivergent perspective, there's a lot of inclusivity within that. It can be a really supportive tool if you use it in the right way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm starting to look at that to a degree. I don't know much about it. I'm not a techie at all.
Not tech savvy, but I'll give it a go.
Yeah, why not? If it helps, it helps.
Yeah.
This has been a really interesting conversation. Thank you. I think we could probably talk on for a lot longer about this subject, to be honest. But we won't. It's been really nice. It's been interesting to see the things that that I've put in place are good things, and looking at yourself is, I find it interesting to look at what I was doing beforehand, what I do now, and there's a big difference in my life because of the knowledge that I have of putting things in place. I make even the simple things of having those headphones on, okay, has a massive difference in how I cope at home. Yeah. Hugely, because it would just ruin it. Because I didn't know what was going on. It was just so much. But now, 99% of the time, I've got that under control. So yeah. Like I say, there's the odd times you can't, but so it's a massive difference. Just knowing yourself and what you can do. I know looking after myself, I'm looking after the family as well. Put myself first, which means I am actually putting my family first. Everything I'm doing is for my family. So
yeah, and I think that's such an amazing realization, isn't it? And it's something that comes with either the diagnosis journey or the self-diagnosis journey, or the kind of journey of discovery. You start realizing that actually, if I'm trying to live in a very neurotypical way, what I'm doing is I'm forcing myself to give more than I have, and to give more than I have in areas that actually I'm never going to meet, because my brain doesn't work in that way. If I can take a step back and I can have grace for myself and start putting myself first in situations and living a life that works for me and for my brain, everyone in my life is going to benefit from that. Not just me, everyone is going to benefit from. You can't pour from an empty cup. So if you're nurturing your own self, then that is going to have an amazing impact on your relationships, your friendships, your career, your finances, everything, because you are more present, you're more aware, and you're more accepting of the fact that you're not going to get it right all the time. You're human, and your brain just happens to work in a bit of a quirky way. and the more that you learn about those quirks, the more quirks there are, funnily enough. It goes on and on. But having that grace is amazing. And what you also then start to see is, they say birds of a feather flock together. So something that I've really discovered in finding out more about myself is that a lot of people in my life, whether that is friends, family members, colleagues that I've got on with really well, actually think very similarly to me. And there's probably a reason for that connection. There's a reason that we probably get on as well as we do, because we think in a similar way, or because we can understand each other. We've got that empathy. So again, having more of a deeper understanding of yourself is going to massively benefit other people as well in your life.
Totally agree. Before we go, one piece of advice you'll tell everybody about overwhelm, and either how to avoid it as much as possible or what to do if you get there.
I think that the biggest thing that you can do when you're feeling overwhelmed is to just take 10 seconds. Taking a minute when you're in overwhelm feels like too much, but actually if you can just sit for 10 seconds and you can start from your feet and you can work your way up. So you can think, okay, let me just force myself to feel my feet right now. Where are my feet? Can I actually feel my toes? Can I feel my feet on the floor? Can I feel my knees? Can I feel my calves? I might even actually physically touch my legs or my calves, give them a little slap, or, whatever that takes. Work your way up your body. And then when it gets to your chest, just sit there. I'm okay. I'm okay. Just take a couple of deep breaths. Remind yourself that you're human, that this is just a feeling right now, and this feeling is going to go away, just like every other feeling is eventually gone away, whether that's joy, whether that's horrendous sadness, whatever it might be. and just having that real empathy for yourself right now. Okay, I'm feeling this way right now. This is not permanent. It's going to be all right. And that's that.
Brilliant. Thank you. Jeorgia Spencer, thank you very much for gracing me with your presence again. For everyone listening, I hope you will enjoy this podcast and start thinking about who you are and what you need to function and what you need to cope in certain situations, be it at work, be it at home, be it in your social life, be it when you're on your own. Have a think about it. Are there things you can change? Are there things that you could put in place to make things a little bit easier for you? And are there things that you do that actually you do because you need to do it? You know, are you staying up late, very late, until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning every night, even when you're working first thing in the morning? Is it because you need to do it? You know, otherwise, you know, you go to bed earlier and you can't get to sleep, so you go to bed later so you can sleep. Think about that. Think about what you are doing and why you're actually doing it, because it might not be a bad thing. You might be doing it for an actual reason. As always, guys, be good, be kind, and remember, you're not alone. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.